Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's media availability with Premier Higgs to comment on today's meeting with the Council Federation. Bon après-midi tout le monde et bienvenue à ce point de presse avec le Premier ministre Blaine Higgs pour commenter la réunion d'aujourd'hui avec le Conseil de la Fédération. Juste pour vous informer que nous avons alloué jusqu'à 4h30 pour la disponibilité. Le Premier ministre a une autre réunion juste après cette disponibilité. Nous essaierons de répondre autant de questions que possible pendant le temps alloué. I just want to let you know we have a hard stop at 4:30 for this availability. The Premier has an important meeting. We will try to get through many questions as possible. We'll now proceed with questions from the members of the media. You have the right to pose your question in the official language of your choice. Nous allons maintenant procéder aux questions des journalistes. Vous avez le droit de poser vos questions dans la langue officielle. We also have an interpreter available for this availability. Please click on the interpretation button at the bottom of the screen to choose English or French. De plus, nous avons un interprète disponible pour ce point de presse. Vous voulez cliquer le bouton d'interprétation au bas de l'écran pour choisir anglais ou français. Jacques Poitras.
Hi, Premier. Can you hear me?
I can.
Anything new to report out of this meeting today with the other premiers? What happened? And if I can pre-refine the question, I mean, there was some discussion that really you weren't able to say no per se to more money. So what is there a deal? Is there more money? Like where are things at?
Well, I think the outcome is that we'll all proceed with the bilateral agreements and accept that we've got something here was far less than what we'd asked for, but we need to move forward, which was kind of a collective opinion amongst the group. I would say though there's certainly a recognition that and a very strong recognition that this doesn't begin to reflect the needs in the healthcare system. I mean, in New Brunswick alone, this funding would account for like 14 days of funding within our healthcare cost system.
Join the meeting.
So it's very much less than what's needed, and there are concerns about what's the renewable portion of this, what's going to be a continuous funding model, because it lays out the 5 and 10 year portions. Should there be reviews in order to see that we're keeping on track. So I think a lot of those concerns are all based on the fact that it's so much less than what we'd originally hoped for.
Thank you. We'll now go to, maintenant on va procéder avec Alexandre Boudreau de l'Acadie Nouvelle.
Hi, Premier.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. During your discussions with Ottawa, obviously there was talk of a sort of accountability mechanism for spending the money and sort of reporting to Ottawa where the money is spent. And part of the stated goal from what we heard at least was that the provinces wouldn't be able to run surpluses on the back of these increases. But you've said that you're likely going to have a surplus this year anyway. So I guess what is this accountability mechanism, and what is its purpose if you're going to run a surplus anyway?
Well, it's not related to the rest of government operation and whether we run a surplus or not. It's related to this federal money being designated specifically for what are referred to as shared priorities. And so how do we define better access to primary care, and how do we show that this money is going directly into improving that? How do we, if we look at electronic records, the same kind of thing, how do we improve surgeries and access to critical surgeries? The discussions that are going to be, I would say, ramped up a lot. Minister LeBlanc is touring now. I think we'll probably meet with him sometime next week. But he's moving through the country and meeting the health minister, meeting with several different provinces. And so I would say that in that it'll be very clear in terms of we land on what amount goes where, and then how do we measure exactly what's achieved by that, and are we getting better? So that's been a commitment I made obviously in the discussions, and that's been a requirement the federal government have had in terms of how the money would be used. We will be able to allocate it, and then it'll be a question of when we actually receive it. but we will certainly allocate it directly for improvements.
Thank you, Premier. Andrew Watt, Brunswick News. Andrew, we can't hear you, so I'm going to cycle back to Nat. I'm going to go ahead and cycle back. Natalie Sturgeon with Global TV.
Premier, if I could just clarify a little bit of Alexandre's question. So I know there was money that was provided to clear a surgery backlog. So these accountability measures, do they directly relate to healthcare funding that's allocated for specific goals that the federal government would want to be achieved provincially?
Yes, but I think there's going to be a pretty easy agreement on what type of priorities need to be set, and because the list that was provided, would certainly be ones we would all agree to. So I don't think that's going to be difficult at all. I actually think the federal government are more interested to see that it's actually going before needed services. So if we demonstrate there's a need in a certain area, they would be inclined to support that as long as we can demonstrate improvements. But I have to caution that the money that's being allocated here is not a windfall of any sort. I mean, it's certainly better than not having an increase at all for sure. But it's as I mentioned, it's a small component of what our total healthcare spend is, and also there's a limitation on what we're actually able to do. So how many surgeries can we perform? What innovation do we need to look at in the system in order to get better outcomes? I think the limited funding here is kind of an indication that we have to look at how we manage healthcare differently, and every province has to do that. And I've said here before that I think New Brunswick can be a leader in that regard, because I think we have a higher capability, both in terms of personnel and in terms of physical infrastructure and resources. So if we utilize that to the fullness, I think we will see some major improvements in New Brunswick healthcare just by managing it better.
Thank you. Allison Sampson with CTV.
I'm just wondering, what are some of the points? Can you hear me?
No, it's very breaking up a lot, Allison. Hard to hear you.
Last time as well. Any better?
Yes.
Just wondering if there's any points in the agreement that really got stuck on when it came to discussing or creating the agreement.
No, I didn't understand the question.
Allison, can you just send it to me and then text it to me? We're now going to go to Alex Villeneuve.
Oui, Monsieur Higgs, j'aimerais savoir, vous, personnellement, est-ce que vous voudriez accepter l'offre d'Ottawa? Est-ce que c'est quelque chose que vous comptez faire?
Yeah, yes, I do. I mean, I think we all agree there's a need to move forward, and there's a need to get on with it, and because we've been at this 2.5 years. So yes, I will go through the bilateral agreements, and I'm sure we'll land on a decision there. But we want to move forward. I raise the other points because we can't let anyone think that it's really going to solve healthcare financial needs going forward. And as we see continuing increases in healthcare costs over time, it's like, at what point does this become an unmanageable portion of your budget? And I know, as it said here before, we're going through a bubble economically, but the indicators going out, our expenses are going to continue to increase, but we're not in any way able to predict whether our revenue streams will continue to be at the levels that we've experienced in the last few years.
Hina with Canadian Press.
Hi, Premier. I was wondering if you could tell us when you say the funding would account for about 14 days. What are the things that this funding would go towards that would only account for 14 days? That's a very specific number.
Well, the reason I put that number out there is to say what this is as a portion of our total healthcare costs. So we have to recognize that the health transfer is only 30% or less than 30% of our total healthcare costs. In other words, it's around $1 billion. We spend $3.6 billion on healthcare, and so this increase in New Brunswick is around $200 million. So if we get $1.2 billion, at the end of the day on a health transfer, we still spend 3 times that in the healthcare system. So my point is simply saying that this is a small increase compared to the cost of running the healthcare system in New Brunswick. And so we're going to have, we have to look at that in context and say, no one should think this is a windfall. No one should think that, all of a sudden we have money for everything, because that is not the case. And I do caution that nor can we find the resources in terms of people in order to fulfill all those requirements if we had the opportunity or had the financing. So that's how I try to reference it. I hope that's kind of is understandable.
So, Premier, I have Andrew Waugh's question in front of me. I'll read it quickly, looking at the clock. Premier, you said last week that you've moved on and that likely the feds aren't going to change their offer. Do the other premiers feel the same, or do you anticipate some will try and carve out their own deals?
I think everyone feels the same in the sense of where the federal positioning is. We want to be cautioned in terms of our response that this is a small portion of what we asked for. And so in given that, let's not lose sight of what's needed in the long haul, but let's get on with what we have. Let's get the bilateral agreements done, because it's been 2.5 years. So I think generally that's the feeling, but everyone feels also that this is just a small component of the big picture or the big requirement, especially as we measure the cost of healthcare going forward and what that means, the needs of adequate funding between the federal and the province.
Premier, we got one more. Can you give us the total increase for the province over 10 years?
Well, it's 1.2 billion over 10, so we end up, in the order, I think it's over 200 million a year for us.
Okay. Thank you very much. Allison said you answered her question. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. We did this on time. I appreciate everybody's patience. Merci beaucoup. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Merci.